Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. February is Black History Month, and the 2020 theme is African Americans and the Vote. This year's theme is in honor of the centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment, granting women's suffrage, and the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, giving Black men the right to vote. Our guests today are James Stowe, Director, Office of Human Rights for Montgomery County; Byron Johns, Co-Chair of Black-Brown Coalition; the Honorable B.B. Berry, Circuit Court Judge for Montgomery County; and Sarah Haj Hamad, Student Trustee at Montgomery College Board. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
So what an important month, Black History Month. And I know the work at the Human Rights Commission is still ongoing.
It is. Unfortunately, we've not made as much progress as we'd like to have made. And I will start off by simply saying that Black History Month is a month we acknowledge those of us who happen to be African American in this country. But it does not somehow diminish all the contributions of others as well. And so it is a chance to lift up our common humanity, specializing and focusing in on those of us who are African Americans. So we think it's a very appropriate time during the course of the year to say, look who we are as a community, look who we are as African Americans, look at the contributions we all have made to make our community a much better place to live and to work and to be who we are. That's
exactly, and it always, I always think of Martin Luther King's birthday when we celebrate that as a nice, introduction to Black History Month is coming, and so many things that he said are still relevant, and unfortunately some of the issues are still ongoing in our communities all over the country, not just here in Montgomery County. The Black and Brown Coalition, for instance, is so important about our children and education and equality.
Yes, we've dealt with, and through the NAACP, I've chaired over 12 years now, the Parents Council and Education Committee. And one of the things we've tried to do is elevate the role of parents to be better advocates. The Black and Brown Coalition came about as of last year, where we realized the Latino community and the various Black communities, be they African immigrant, be they Caribbean descent or African American, pretty much deal with the same issues of inequities that have been structurally created and perpetrated over the years. So the coalition has really come together. We represent, Black and Brown students represent 54% of the entire student body at Montgomery County Public Schools, which is the 14th largest in the nation.
That's amazing. And I think it's fantastic, right? Diversity will make us all so much better, but there's challenges, right? I mean, what do you see as a panel as some of the bigger challenges that we have?
Let me just start, because one of the things that came about that really has promoted our efforts is a study done about the resource inequities. And that showed that Black and Brown students have been systematically impeded from performing. They're 1.5 to 2 times as likely to have a novice teacher and an inexperienced or a novice principal leading their schools.
That's as a result of that study. They hired for people to come in and analyze how our schools were staffed and why our Black and Brown children were struggling and not doing as well as others, and with the gap. Isn't that right?
Yes, that Educational Resource Strategies is the group that was brought in. They do this nationwide, and what they found is structural systemic barriers that are across the system. And for a district that is very significantly thought to be one of the more progressive and wealthier.
Right.
One of the statistics people don't realize is that there are more children in low income, or we call it farms, free and reduced meals. There are more children in Montgomery County schools that are on low income on farms than all students in Washington, D.C.
That's crazy. Yeah. And then, and the challenges you face in school doesn't change when you get out of school, right? Right? I mean, that's, I imagine with the Human Rights Commission, you see the discrimination and the racism is still going.
It's still there. We still have, in terms of the number of complaints that come into our office, we are there to look at allegations of discrimination in employment, fair housing, public accommodations, issue of intimidation that occurs in the community as well. All of them have one theme. Race is still the predominant kind of reason that people file complaints, although
Right.
I will say to you that the other one that is fastly approaching the top as well is those of us who may come from different parts of the world.
Right.
And so that's a big issue. Those who don't speak English as their first language, there's some issues there as well. And so we still see the same thing happen again. And you mentioned something a minute ago about the challenge that we have in terms of our diverse community. About 19% African American, about 19% Latino, about 15% Asian, and then about the rest of us who are white. And that's a very different place than where we were, for instance, in 1990.
Right.
Very,
Things
very
have
different.
changed, yeah.
And so a lot of people are okay with that, and there are some folks who are kind of struggling with that.
Yeah.
And so part of that challenge that you mentioned earlier on is how do we in fact manage that?
Right.
How do we manage a system where we don't have enough resources to go around to everyone?
Right.
So how do you in fact pick which school gets the resources?
Right.
The novice teachers. They've got to go someplace.
Right.
So you got to kind of figure out how that all works. And so one of our challenges.
And why aren't novice teachers teamed up with experienced teachers? Why is it that the experienced teachers get to pick wherever they go, and then, because you're new, you're stuck with certain schools? That shouldn't be the criteria for deciding where you're going to teach. I mean, it seems very Pollyanna on my part, but I mean, at the same time,
Well, the good news is, I think that has
the good news is you're on the case.
the realization that what you said is true, that some of those have been by practice, by policy, some of it's contractual agreements with the employee associations. All of that together has created this system of inequities. And all of those are being addressed even as we speak. So we're very hopeful. The budget today was agreed to, the superintendent's recommended budget has agreed to by the board, but it's got to go forward now to the county exec and the county council, and that'll be going forward over the next few weeks. And from there, we'll see how that folds out. But in addition, the negotiations are underway for the association contracts. So we're hopeful both sides have been working in good faith. We've certainly brought the community out. We had a forum with over 1,300 Black and brown people. We had it simultaneously translated in 3 languages.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
brought people together, and we had community leaders pledge to address and do their best, and they're still working at it. We're cautiously
But that coalition
optimistic.
to me is one of the most important things that I have seen come out in a while, because it's not just one group, it's various groups coming together. We're all people of color, and we all have the same needs and the same issues, and to come together and fight for our children and for those inequities to be, hopefully done away with, to me is an example for other jurisdictions to follow, to fight for and to come together. I love the word coalition, instead of everyone trying to fight for their piece of the pie and they keep making it smaller, fight for a bigger piece for all of us, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's a process. Fortunately, we have 25 different associations or organizations that have bought on. Not everybody is in education. There are people from the health sector. There are people from the housing, from criminal justice, and the like, because education has pretty much been
Key.
identified as a determinant for so many other factors in life.
Right, for success. Well, I know someone who's been very successful, Bibi. Why don't you tell us about your experience? Because you're an attorney. You were an attorney in a big firm here in Montgomery County, and you were successful. And then, now you're sitting on the circuit court.
It's funny. Other people say you're successful. I'm not sure, but I have accomplished a good deal. I'm very proud of that. but this subject matter makes me think about a question I'm asked often, which is, what is it like coming up in Montgomery County as an attorney, as a woman of color? And one thing that comes to mind is being at tables with white men or other men, and maybe a sprinkle of other folks, and you say something and you think, wow, is my voice at an octave that people don't hear it because it's like you never said it? These are things that women experience even now as we celebrate the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which was, by the way, ratified federally in the 20s, but it wasn't ratified until 48 in Maryland. But just realizing it was interesting as I experienced that over and over again. It got to the point where I said, okay, I have to speak up. I have to speak
like me, loudly.
Louder.
I'm never accused of being quiet.
Right. and sometimes maybe interrupt because it's just you're not going to be heard. And so at some point, I remember when I was a magistrate, family magistrate in the Montgomery County Circuit Court for 2 years. Magistrates preside over family law matters, so it's similar to a judge, but not the same thing. And I remember one of the judges seeing that when I was at a meeting and I was brand spanking new, and they were impressed at the fact that I had something to say and expressed that. But I'm so used to having to do that, and I think one of the things that I would counsel women, particularly of color, is don't let people shut you down. Don't let people quiet you. You have something to say, and make sure you say it. So that was really, I think, a big part of my development and getting to a point where I sought out different opportunities to meet new people and get out there in the community and create my pathway to where I am now. Speaking up.
Right, and being part of the conversation, regardless of whether they want us to be in it. But Sarah, as a student at Montgomery College, and you're on the board of trustees, how does your experience relate with our guests today?
I think it was interesting when you mentioned the distinction between African American students or African American population or people of color who are facing discrimination versus people whose English isn't their first language, and making that distinction between that experience, because that's what I identify as. English isn't my first language, if anything, it's my third. So coming here and being the oldest of 4 siblings, where my mom's first language isn't English and there's an accent, and that advocacy piece of going to schools where me and my younger sister have had to take up that role and say, okay, English might not be our first language, but we're more than capable. We're like the ability to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
I think that's been the biggest element for me in joining college and saying, I've moved to America, and the biggest reason we moved here is access to education, access to resources. And with that comes, I'm not gonna stand still and allow somebody to take away my opportunity. So when it comes to sitting in a room and saying, I'm gonna speak up for myself, I'm gonna advocate for others that can't do the same. So I've been fortunate enough to sit as the student body president on the Tacoma Park campus at Montgomery College. So that enabled me to kind of fight for equity when it comes to class availability, to make sure that our professors or our faculty members are being held accountable, that our students are receiving the treatment that they deserve, whether it be we're making sure that books are staying affordable and things of that sort. And with me wanting to go into a career in advocacy and law and policy, it only made sense for me to sit on the board of trustees, and that's been a great opportunity for me to kind of see how policies are written and how those changes are made. So I've been very fortunate to kind of have that experience. So every negative experience, whether it be the discrimination, the underestimation, where you're told to sit in a room and keep quiet, has been fuel to kind of do the exact opposite.
So as part of your experience, did anyone mentor you, or did you kind of have to look for your own mentors, or you've just done it on your own?
I don't think anybody ever really does it on their own. I've been very fortunate that My mom, even though English hasn't been her first language, she's always pushed me. She's seen my ability to kind of speak up and take action, so she's always pushed me in that realm. But then ever since I joined Montgomery College, my student life director, actually Miss Kimberly Jones, has been my mentor without even realizing it.
Great.
So whether that be pushing me in areas where she sees I have strength, whether she sees my power in different things, I would have never applied for Board of Trustees had she not seen me in that role and motivated me to do so. So I've been
do you
fortunate
see your
enough.
fellow students? How are they doing?
I've been in places where I'm happy to see the students that are advocating for themselves, that are standing up and taking action. But unfortunately, not everybody is either raised that way or is empowered in such a manner to kind of stand up and speak for themselves. So there are obviously spaces where you see students and you're upset. You're like, oh, I wish you would say something. But I think with us as student leaders, at least on campus, our role is to empower other students, not only speak on their behalf, to take on such a role. So you do see a shift in students or younger people kind of standing up and saying, we're not going to stand for the status quo and we're going to change things.
So what would be the advice that you all would have for the students that Sarah's talking about that are struggling and can't really they don't have the backing of a great mom or a mentor to help them out? What would you say?
Well, you know what? I'm sure there's a lot more to add to that, but something that I thought about while you were talking about the mentorship piece is something that that has helped me tremendously. There are potential mentors everywhere. And if I'm to give any advice about how you get to a certain place, it's listen to the advice that you're given by people that you trust, and put yourself in uncomfortable places and circumstances. For me, it was public speaking. It was taking the opportunity to teach. It was going to networking events where you don't know anybody and it's so incredibly uncomfortable, but you do it. Because someone who has gotten to a certain point, someone that you trust, someone that you respect, told you to do it. And I think my advice to young people, to people of color, to women, to anybody is listen to the advice you're given. And if you can follow that advice, even if it's uncomfortable, go ahead and do it.
What about the parents of these kids in primary and secondary school? I'm showing my roots now in Argentina. That's elementary and high school.
Yeah.
What do you say to them about advocating for their kids, or what are some recommendations? Because I'm sure everyone's saying that's great, fantastic, but how do I do this, right?
So what we do, what I really encourage, because I find a lot of folks will try to advocate once there's the problem,
Right.
the issue. And there's two philosophies that I've kind of learned in this. One is you need to be a part of organizing together. This is a very complex system in many ways, at many layers. And so to advocate, you really need the benefit of the village, to who people have gone before. That's kind of what mentors do. But when you do it as even peers, they don't have to be people who were further along, but sometimes it's the peer, the parent who has seen it from a different view, has maybe gotten one step ahead of you on this, and that becomes one source of enabling people to be more effective. The thing that I've learned in the last, I think my realization was probably 5 years ago, it's not enough to do it at the grassroots, at the bottom level. People like Sarah here are in positions, she's put herself on a board level where she's now able to start looking at systemic change. Because what I have found over the 12 years is that the faces change, but the problems are the same.
Yes, I
And
agree.
so it's really when you start getting at the policy and the systems level that you can start to change, where you can change things that will benefit people that will never know. You will never know
Right.
for time. So
Right.
it's really that top down, bottoms up.
I think, though, one of the things that occurs to me, though, and I'm so glad to hear Sarah talk about her stepping up and speaking on behalf of, once you get into a position of responsibility, of leadership, of authority and so forth, and I'm talking about those of us who are black, that's what I'm talking about, we can't forget our charge, our opportunity, our mission to not only lift up those of us who happen to be also black in this community, but also to see ourselves as role models to allow people then to find themselves also in a position to take over from where you are.
Right.
So I'm looking at the issue of succession planning.
Right.
We do very little of that in our community.
We do.
And I think it's across the board in terms of minority communities. But, you know, Judge's here and Byron's here and Sarah, how do you then think about identifying? That's the other way around, but by the way, but mentorship also occurs, right? You identify somebody who is someone who you believe might have the skill sets or the interest to do what you're doing.
Right.
And you invite him or her into your world and allow them to have experiences and exposure that otherwise would not happen. But it is those of us who have had this opportunity to be able to say to ourselves then, you're not going to always be there. That may not always be your interest.
Right.
And so therefore, who might come in and step up and then be in a position to also speak up and be a part of what's going on? It's so frustrating to see people who have been able to acquire positions of responsibility who are not there in, let me change it around a little bit, are there in just simply their presence.
Right. They're not there to
they're not there to
continue.
voice,
Who's coming
and
after
I'm not
me?
speaking dispersion about anybody specifically,
No,
right?
right.
But my point is that what a missed opportunity it
Yes.
is. Be able to voice a concern or a perspective, and not to the non-interest of those who may be in the room who may be of the majority race at all. I'm simply saying that's not their experience.
Right. Right.
And so
right.
therefore, you got to be in a position then to speak up and be a part of that. So I'm hopeful that in Black History Month,
Yes.
that those of us who are in that particular role
Yes.
see ourselves as not only as ambassadors for ourselves and our own careers and our own pursuits, but rather trying to reach one and teach one.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you said that because that is the whole point of the show. Is I'm trying to get everyone to think about what is the succession because we need the young folks to come up after us and keep pushing and keep advocating because we can't do it forever, right? But I know we have about probably a couple minutes left in the show, and I know that you've got some events that are coming
Yes,
up.
I do.
So why don't you tell us about those
More
events?
than a couple of minutes, it turns out. But anyway, we'll jump at it real quickly.
Yeah.
Let me just announce, too, that we are found in the position to move forward our Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. We're very excited about this. This is our commission. We'll be looking at, unfortunately, the issue of lynching that took place in Montgomery County. There were 3 that took place in Montgomery County. So we are in the process now of formalizing that. It has already gone through. It is now an actually established commission in Montgomery County. We'll start kicking that off this month. And so we'll be looking to see ourselves as to how we're going to recognize those persons that were in fact killed here in our county. So that's coming up. The other thing real quickly is this. We have actually it's occurring in the month of April, our Civil Rights Tour.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We are hoping that every person in this community, and I mean every person, not those of us who happen to be black, but in this community will take advantage of going on our Civil Rights Tour April the 18th to the 26th. We start in Greensboro, North Carolina with A&T State University, the 4 students who were there, who sat in at the Woolworth lunch counter. We headed down to Atlanta, Georgia from there. Obviously the birthplace of Dr. King, also his final resting place. From there we're going on then to Birmingham, Alabama. That was where the children's movement took place. It was actually called the Children's March as part of that event, and the 4 little girls that were killed at 16th Street Baptist Church. From there, we headed down then to Montgomery, Alabama. Dr. King pastored there in Montgomery, Alabama. And also Rosa Parks, of course, the famous sit-in took place there as well. From there, we headed down then to Selma, Alabama. The march that took place about voting, by the way. And that was ground zero for the Voting Rights Act in Selma, Alabama, in Dallas County. So we'll have that experience and really know what that was about. Crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge as well. And be a part of what happened on Bloody Sunday back in March 7th of 1965. From there, we're headed down then to Little Rock, Arkansas, Central High School. You need to understand what happened with the Little Rock 9 and how important that was as a major event in this desegregation of public schools across America. We're also going to go in Jackson, Mississippi, the home of Medgar Evers, and see what happened there, the great civil rights leader in that state. Turn things around that whole community. We're going to learn what happened, took place there as well. Going by Tougaloo College, for instance. Tougaloo College was one of the actual places for which most of the marches took place and came back every time after each march to kind of figure out what was going to happen next.
So if anybody wants to know, we're going to post your website.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have it on the YouTube channel so they can find it. But it sounds like an awesome event. I hope everyone takes a
I do
look
too.
and goes.
And you can be
goes.
back by primary voting on April
28th is,
right?
is
You're gonna
primary
be back
voting.
by then?
20th is
Okay.
primary voting. We will get back and more encouraged and more dedicated to making sure we are going to vote.
All right.
We'll be inspired.
So that's our show. This show can be seen on your YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and please check out Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow on Facebook and Instagram. I would like to thank my amazing guests for joining me today, and I also would like to thank our audience for watching and invite you to join us next time. I'm Mariana Cordier, and good night.